40-something. The words themselves feel substantial, weighty, like a well-worn leather-bound book, filled with chapters of experiences, both joyful and challenging. We arrive at this stage of life, often, with a carefully curated image of what it should look like, a mental picture painted with broad strokes of success, stability, and a general sense of having it all together. Successful career? Check. Loving family? Check. Perfectly organized linen closet with color-coded towels? Well, let's just say that's a work in progress. And that's where the trouble often begins. We've spent so much of our lives striving for this elusive ideal of perfect, meticulously polishing every facet of our existence, that when the inevitable cracks start to appear, and they always do, we feel a sense of panic, like the carefully constructed facade we've built is suddenly crumbling, revealing the messy, imperfect reality beneath. I remember vividly the day the weight of perfection started to feel truly unbearable. It wasn't a dramatic, life-altering event. It was a Wednesday. I was juggling a demanding work project, a teenager with a serious case of eye-rolling, and the overwhelming desire to finally tackle the overflowing junk drawer in my kitchen. My meticulously planned schedule had imploded by mid-morning. My carefully crafted proposal was riddled with last-minute edits, and my teenager was communicating exclusively in sighs. I looked around at the chaos, at the imperfect reality of my life, and I just stopped trying to hold it all together, stopped pretending I had all the answers, stopped striving for the impossible ideal of perfect. It wasn't a conscious, deliberate decision, more like a quiet surrender, a weary acknowledgement that the relentless pursuit of perfection was leaving me exhausted, stressed, and ultimately deeply unhappy. It was a whisper of rebellion against the tyranny of shoulds. That Wednesday was a turning point. It wasn't a magical transformation, no sudden shedding of ingrained perfectionist tendencies. It was more like the first crack in a dam, a small leak that hinted at the possibility of a different way of being, a different way of seeing myself. For years, I had defined myself by my ability to do it all. I was the woman who never missed a deadline, never forgot a birthday, never left a single dirty dish in the sink overnight. My identity was inextricably linked to this image of flawless efficiency. But what I didn't realize was that this relentless pursuit of perfection was also robbing me of joy, spontaneity, and the ability to truly connect with myself and others. It was like running on a treadmill, set at an impossible speed, always striving, always pushing, but never actually arriving. I remember a specific instance, a work presentation that had me in a state of near constant anxiety for weeks. I was so fixated on getting every single detail right, on anticipating every possible question, that I was paralyzed with self-doubt. I spent countless hours agonizing over every word, every image, every graph. The presentation was ultimately well received, but the emotional cost was enormous. I was stressed, sleep-deprived, and completely disconnected from my family. Looking back, I realized that the pursuit of perfection had completely overshadowed the actual purpose of the presentation, to share valuable information and connect with my colleagues. It wasn't just work, either. My personal life was also a minefield of self-imposed expectations. I had this idealized image in my head of the perfect mother, the woman who effortlessly juggled work and family, who always had a home-cooked meal on the table, whose children were always impeccably behaved and polite. Of course, the reality was far from this ideal. My kids were messy, my house was often chaotic, and some nights, dinner was a hastily assembled assortment of leftovers. But instead of accepting this perfectly imperfect reality, I constantly berated myself for falling short. I felt like I was failing at this motherhood thing. Not because my kids were particularly challenging, although, let's be honest, teenagers can be challenging, but because I was holding myself to an impossible standard. I remember one particularly chaotic Saturday morning. I was trying to make pancakes. My kids were arguing over the last of the syrup, and the dog had decided to stage a dramatic protest by refusing to go outside. I felt myself getting increasingly frustrated, my inner critic screaming at me for not being able to manage even this simple breakfast routine. In that moment, I snapped. I yelled at my kids. I may have tossed a spatula or two, and I ended up burning the pancakes beyond recognition. The shame and guilt I felt afterward were overwhelming. I had allowed my desire for perfection, for control, to completely derail me. I had let the pursuit of an ideal rob me of the joy of a simple family breakfast. These experiences, and countless others, started to chip away at my carefully constructed facade of perfection. I began to realize that the pursuit of this impossible ideal was not only exhausting, but also deeply damaging. It was preventing me from being present, from truly enjoying the simple moments of life, from genuinely connecting with the people I loved. It was creating a constant state of low-level anxiety, a feeling that I was never quite good enough, never quite doing enough. Slowly, tentatively, I started to experiment with letting go. It wasn't easy. Years of ingrained habits and societal expectations are deeply ingrained. But I started small. I gave myself permission to leave a few dishes in the sink overnight. I stopped agonizing over every single detail of my work projects. I allowed my kids to be messy, to be imperfect, to be themselves. I stopped trying to control every aspect of my life, and I started to embrace the beautiful chaos of it all. And something amazing happened. The world didn't fall apart. In fact, the opposite happened. I started to feel lighter, more relaxed, more present. I discovered that imperfection wasn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced. It was in the messy, imperfect moments of life that I found the most joy, the most connection, the most meaning. It was in the laughter over a burnt pancake, the shared frustration of a missed flight, the quiet moments of connection amidst the chaos of a busy day. I remember a family vacation we took a few years ago. It was supposed to be the perfect vacation, meticulously planned and organized down to the last detail. Of course, things didn't go according to plan. We missed a connecting flight. We got hopelessly lost, trying to find our rental car, and it rained almost every single day. But instead of getting stressed and frustrated, I decided to let go of my expectations. I embraced the chaos, the unexpected detours, the imperfect moments, and it turned out to be one of the best vacations we've ever had. We laughed until our sides hurt. We explored hidden gems we never would have found if we'd stuck to our itinerary, and we connected in a way that wouldn't have been possible if I had been clinging to my perfect plan. Letting go of perfection has also allowed me to be more authentic in my relationships. I'm no longer trying to project an image of flawless competence. I'm more willing to be vulnerable, to admit my mistakes, to ask for help when I need it. And in doing so, I've discovered a deeper level of connection with the people in my life. I've realized that true connection comes not from presenting a perfect version of ourselves, but from sharing our authentic selves, flaws and all. I remember a conversation I had with a friend recently. We were talking about the challenges of middle age, the feeling of being pulled in so many directions, the pressure to have it all. And she said something that really resonated with me. She said, "I'm tired of trying to be perfect. I just want to be real." That's it, isn't it? The deep, underlying desire to be real, to be authentic, to be ourselves, imperfections and all. Middle age, for me, has been a process of shedding the layers of perfectionism that I've carried for so long. It's been a process of discovering who I am underneath all the expectations and shoulds. It's been a process of learning to embrace the messy, imperfect beauty of life. It's about trading the curated image for the genuine experience. It's not about giving up on excellence or letting go of our aspirations. It's not about lowering our standards or becoming complacent. It's about shifting our focus from the pursuit of an impossible ideal to the celebration of our authentic selves. It's about recognizing that our worth is not tied to our ability to be perfect. It's about finding freedom in the mess, in the imperfections, in the crumbling edges of what we thought our lives should be. It's about accepting that growth and beauty often emerge from the cracks, from the places where we've stumbled and learned. I remember another seemingly insignificant moment that had a profound impact. I was attempting to bake a complicated, multi-layered cake for a friend's birthday. Everything that could go wrong did. The layers were uneven, the frosting was runny, and the decorations looked like they'd been applied by a toddler. No offense to toddlers. I was on the verge of throwing the whole thing in the trash when I stopped myself. I took a deep breath, looked at the lopsided, imperfect cake, and I laughed. I laughed at the absurdity of it all, at the ridiculousness of my striving for perfection in a cake. And then I did something I wouldn't have done before. I took a picture of the disastrous cake and sent it to my friend, along with a message that said, "Happy birthday. This cake is a perfect representation of how imperfect I am, but it's made with love." And you know what? My friend loved it. She loved the honesty, the vulnerability, the sheer imperfection of it all. And that cake, that messy, imperfect cake, became a symbol of my own journey away from perfectionism. It's about realizing that perfect is not only unattainable, it's also incredibly boring. It's in the imperfections, in the unexpected twists and turns, in the messy, chaotic moments of life that we find the most joy, the most meaning, the most connection. It's about trading the heavy, constricting armor of perfect for the comfortable, slightly worn sweater of real. And honestly, it feels so much better. It's like finally taking off shoes that have been a size too small for years. You can wiggle your toes, breathe a little easier, and move forward with a newfound sense of freedom. This journey away from perfection isn't a destination. It's a continuous process. There will be days when the old habits creep back in, when the inner critic starts whispering those familiar doubts. There will be moments when you slip back into old patterns, when you find yourself striving for that elusive ideal once again. That's okay. Be gentle with yourself. Acknowledge the slip-up, and then gently redirect yourself back to the path of self-acceptance and self-compassion. I remember a time when I was giving a presentation at work, a few years after my initial awakening to the beauty of imperfection. I had prepared thoroughly, but halfway through, I completely blanked. My mind went totally empty. In the past, this would have sent me into a spiral of panic. I would have berated myself for my incompetence, my imperfection. But this time, I took a deep breath, smiled at the audience, and said, "Well, that's interesting. My brain seems to have taken a vacation. Let's see, where were we?" And then, with a little help from my notes, I picked up where I left off. The audience chuckled, I chuckled, and the presentation went on. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was a powerful reminder that imperfection is not a failure. It's simply a part of being human. This journey is also about learning to accept others' imperfections. It's about letting go of the judgments we place on ourselves and on others. It's about recognizing that everyone is doing the best they can, given their circumstances and their own internal struggles. It's about offering grace and compassion, both to ourselves and to those around us. I remember a conversation I had with my daughter, who was struggling with the pressure to be perfect in school. She was so worried about getting good grades, about being the best in her class. I shared with her my own experiences with perfectionism, my own journey towards self-acceptance. I told her that grades are important, but they don't define her worth. I told her that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to be imperfect. And I told her that I loved her, not because of her grades, but because of who she is. I saw a weight lift from her shoulders. In that moment, she started to relax, to breathe a little easier, and I realized that by letting go of my own perfectionism, I was giving her permission to let go of hers. This journey away from perfection is not about becoming complacent or giving up on our goals. It's not about lowering our standards or ceasing to strive for growth. It's about finding a healthier, more sustainable way to pursue our aspirations. It's about recognizing that progress is not linear, that there will be setbacks and detours along the way. It's about learning to embrace the journey, imperfections and all. It's about trading the pursuit of an impossible ideal for the celebration of our authentic selves. It's about recognizing that our worth is not tied to our ability to be perfect. It's about finding freedom in the mess, in the imperfections, in the crumbling edges of what we thought our lives should be. It's about realizing that the most beautiful, meaningful moments often arise from the most unexpected, imperfect circumstances. It's about learning to dance in the rain, to laugh at our mistakes, to embrace the beautiful chaos of life. And it's about knowing, deep down in your soul, that you are enough, just as you are, imperfections and all. You are worthy of love, happiness, and fulfillment, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. And that, my friend, is more than enough. And it's about recognizing that this journey, this shedding of perfectionism, is a gift we give ourselves. It's a gift of self-acceptance, a gift of grace, a gift of freedom. It's a gift that allows us to truly live, to truly experience the fullness of life without the constant weight of expectations and self-judgment. I remember a time, not so long ago, when I was invited to give a talk at a local women's group. I was terrified. The thought of standing in front of a room full of people, sharing my story, made my palm sweat and my heart race. The perfectionist in me wanted to meticulously script every word, to rehearse every gesture, to ensure that every single aspect of the presentation was flawless. But then I remembered my journey, my slow but steady progress away from the tyranny of perfect. I decided to do things differently. I prepared, of course, but I didn't obsess. I focused on the message I wanted to share, the connection I hoped to make, rather than the flawless execution of the presentation itself. And you know what? It wasn't perfect. I stumbled over my words. I forgot a point I wanted to make, and I probably made a few awkward gestures. But it was real. It was authentic, and it was deeply connecting. After the talk, several women came up to me and shared their own stories, their own struggles with perfectionism. They told me how much my vulnerability resonated with them, how much it helped them to feel less alone. And in that moment, I realized that my imperfection, my willingness to be real, was more powerful than any attempt at perfection ever could have been. This journey is also about redefining success. It's about shifting our focus from external achievements to internal well-being. It's about recognizing that true success is not measured by the size of our house or the title on our business card, but by the quality of our relationships, the joy we experience in our daily lives, and the sense of peace we cultivate within ourselves. I remember a period in my life when I was completely consumed by my career. I was working long hours, sacrificing my personal life, and constantly striving for the next promotion, the next accolade. I thought that if I could just achieve a certain level of success, then I would finally be happy. But the truth was, the more I achieved, the more empty I felt. It wasn't until I started to let go of my perfectionism, until I started to prioritize my well-being and my relationships, that I began to experience true, lasting happiness. I realized that success, as defined by society, was not the key to fulfillment. The key was connection, authenticity, and living a life that aligned with my values. And it's about learning to say no. It's about setting boundaries and protecting our time and energy. It's about recognizing that we can't do everything, and that's okay. It's about giving ourselves permission to prioritize our own needs, even if it means saying no to others. I remember a time when I was constantly saying yes to every request, every invitation, every opportunity, even when I was already feeling overwhelmed. I thought that by saying yes, I was being helpful, being accommodating, being perfect. But what I was really doing was depleting myself, spreading myself too thin, and neglecting my own needs. It wasn't until I started to say no more often, until I started to set boundaries, that I began to feel more in control of my life. And I discovered that saying no is not selfish. It's an act of self-care. This journey away from perfection is a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey of uncovering who we truly are beneath all the layers of expectations and shoulds. It's a journey of learning to love and accept ourselves, imperfections and all. It's a journey of finding freedom in the mess, in the chaos, in the beautiful imperfection of life. And it's a journey that is worth taking every single step of the way. Because on the other side of perfectionism lies a life that is more authentic, more joyful, and more deeply fulfilling than you ever imagined. It's a life where you are enough, just as you are. And that, my friend, is the most perfect thing of all.